Hello everyone, welcome to What If Quirkless Deku Becomes Ultimate Spider-Man Movie 1. Before we start, please go support 0302 for writing that awesome fanfic. This is the translated version I made. There will be some mistake in character's gender, but of course Deku is a male. After the disappointment he got when he met his idol and was denied the possibility of somehow fulfilling his dream, the desire to end it all was strong, but that stopped when another great hero appeared. One who gave him a legacy. One that taught him that with great power comes great responsibility. Chapter 1. Everything was shit for the life of a green-haired boy. His mother, although loving, could not stop looking at him with that expression. Izuku clenched his fists even tighter than before as he looked at a notebook that was wet and burnt, completely destroyed. That look from his mother, that look full of pity, was painful to see. He had always thought that. He understood that she felt guilty that he did not have a quirk. Damn it! While whispering it, Izuku tightly squeezed his previous notebook filled with information of the heroes he loved so much, those heroes he wanted to equal. It was asking too much that his mother at least gave him her support, and didn't even look at him with pity. That wasn't the only damn problem in his life. His friend, the one who should be his friend, the one who was his friend in the past, had become an arrogant hitch when he got a quirk that made explosions using his sweat. From the moment he got his quirk at 4 years old, he had dedicated himself to making his life more difficult. It was already complicated enough being part of the 20% of society that didn't have powers, but now that only added one more portion to his plate. Clenching his fists tighter, Izuku began to exert force until he managed to split his notebook in half. He only broke it and threw it into the fountain from which he had taken it. It was so complicated, it was so difficult, it was so damn selfish of him to ask for at least a normal life. A life where his dreams at least wouldn't cause him this pain. Turning his back on the fountain where he threw his notebook, he began to walk away from the place while tears came out of his eyes, eyes that showed fury and sadness. Walking under a bridge looking for the tranquility that came with being able to walk alone. Although he believed it was because he had already become accustomed to solitude, even though his mother was with him, he always felt so alone in the world, so different, without friends and without people close to whom he could ever go to for support. His thoughts were quickly interrupted when he noticed a green sludge coming out of a sewer. He quickly thought about escaping, but before he could even take a step, he was caught by the mud, which began to suffocate him. He could see eyes that were watching him now that they were in the mud. The shape of an upside-down face confirmed to him that it was a villain, or at least something like that. Trying to find something to escape with, searching, trying, hoping to find something to escape with, his fight was slowly disappearing, taking into account that a person who didn't even have a quirk couldn't do much. In the end, the hitch who was supposed to be his friend was right. In the end, how does he want to do something if he can't do anything? As his eyes closed and darkness claimed his vision, he heard the rumble, and when he realized it, he was thrown hard against a wall into which he crashed while he saw how the green mud was spread all over the place. Coughing a little as he tried to slowly recover, Izuku stood up, and what he found was a hero. But not just any hero. He was the number one, the hero he admired so much, the hero who always kept a smile. Seeing him, he quickly thought about taking out his notebook so that he could give him his autograph. But he remembered what happened to her, and although he clenched his fist a little with some sadness, he quickly cheered up and approached his idol, although it was not the way he wanted. The way he approached him was more like someone who had just lost a relative. "All power?" Izuku asked with a slightly weak voice as he thought about how to ask his question. Yes, tell me, boy." To the question of the boy he had just saved, he answered with doubt, although at first he was somewhat hurried by the villain, and because he did not have much time left, he put it aside to see the look on the boy's face, a look he had seen in some people throughout his career. While he was looking at the boy, he was thinking of a way to keep the villain from escaping from his hands. It didn't take long for him to find a way when he saw a plastic bottle not far from him, which he took to pick up the villain while, although it didn't seem like it, he paid attention to the boy he saved. "Do you think someone without a quirk can be a hero?" At the question, All Might turned quickly to look at the boy. His eyes saw hope in the boy's expression. No were the simple words that came out of All Might's mouth simple, but with a great weight for the child in front of him even though he was not aware of it. Someone without a quirk can't be a hero. If you want to help someone be a policeman or a firefighter, but a hero? No, you would only put yourself in danger and give us more work. After finishing collecting the villain in the bottle, All Might said goodbye with a handshake and jumped off into the sky. Izuku's gaze was on the ground. Tears wanted to come out of his eyes, but they wouldn't come out. He had to make a decision, and he made it by running away without looking back. When he realized he was on the edge of a building where he finally looked at the sky and released everything he had in his body. Can't I be a hero? Is it wrong to have a dream? Her scream, although it didn't reach anyone, was with all her strength while tears ran down her face. I hate you. Without stopping to shed tears, the worst things in his life passed before his eyes: the gaze of his mother, a gaze that he hated so much, the abuse of the one who should have given his friend, the mocking gaze of his schoolmates, how the teachers looked at him in a contemptuous way, clenching his fists. Izuku wanted to end it all. So looking down, he looked at the height of the building he was in while a phrase resonated in his mind. Do you want to be a hero? Then why don't you jump off a building? Maybe in your next life you can become one? As he took a step closer to the edge of the building, Izuku's gaze never left the ground. Wow, boy, don't do anything dangerous. It's better to see a normal broccoli than a squashed one, don't you think? Turning quickly back, Izuku's surprise was not missing from his face, as he did not expect a voice to appear in a place where he thought he would be alone. Not seeing anything, Izuku was surprised and even doubted his mental stability. So now he was just about to return to his own when he saw something swinging from above. So raising his gaze, he found something he never expected to see in this hero who was one of the greatest and one of the ones he respected the most. Spider-Man? The green-haired boy asked with great doubt about seeing another of the greatest heroes that have ever existed in just one day, although that made him remember how his idol had broken his dream. The one and only, he said with a funny voice. What are you doing here? Looking doubtfully. Well, I was passing through the neighborhood, and when I was swinging around the place I came across the characteristic scene of a teenager jumping, and well, although I understand the excitement of jumping into the air doing a leap of faith, well, I don't think it's a good idea unless they can fly or shoot spider webs. PIU. The last thing the man with the characteristic red and blue suit said was while shooting his spider webs. You don't even understand it. Nobody understands it, the green-haired boy shouted angrily. He didn't know what to think about the heroes anymore. Who are they to judge a child and his dreams just for not having a quirk? Of course I won't understand something I don't know, but I understand that death isn't the best. Life is beautiful as is death, but at least you enjoy life, right? So will you tell me what's wrong with you, kid? Come on, tell your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. Although you couldn't even see his face, it was obvious that there was a smile behind that red mask he had. Looking at him a little longer than necessary without saying anything, Izuku didn't say anything. He just stayed thinking, although his fists didn't stop clenching with great force, making his knuckles turn white. Such was the force that his arms were already shaking. I always wanted to be a hero since I was little. All I always saw was All Might saving everyone with a smile. I wanted to do that, achieve that. Help everyone with a smile that gave hope. When I was 4 years old, they told me to give up. Without a quirk, I couldn't be a hero. I sought support from my mother, but she just looked at me sadly, stopping clenching his fists. Izuku sat on the edge of the building as tears fell. Approaching the Spider-Man boy, he sat right next to him as he looked at the horizon while paying attention to the green-haired boy next to him. Everything just kept getting worse. People looked at me with pity or looked at me as if I wasn't even worth considering. The one who was my friend started to bother me, and all my mother did was look at me with that look. Her words were supportive, but her eyes showed her true thoughts. Is it illegal not to have a quirk for the world to treat me like this? The anger in his eyes was reflected. Izuku was looking at the horizon, remembering everything he lived through because of his condition. Even if you don't believe it, boy, I understand you. Speaking in a calmer voice than the normal one he always used, the joy that characterized the arachnid hero was not there. He was about to answer what the hero had said when he was stopped by a spider web that covered his mouth, preventing him from speaking. I was quirkless too, although now you see me with great power. Ha ha ha. Before I was like you. A boy who was bullied for being a nerd without a quirk to show was seen as less. I hope you can keep a secret, boy. Slowly the arachnid's hands rose to his face, where he slowly took off his mask, showing Izuku the face of a man around 30 years old, maybe more or maybe less, with brown hair and blue eyes. I was also bullied by the one who used to be a friend. But everything changed one day when a spider bit me, and it gave me the powers that I now have. Raising his hand towards the horizon as if he wanted to reach something, Spidey spoke with nostalgia to Izuku. When Izuku finally managed to get the web out of his mouth, he looked a little surprised at the hero in front of him. Not only had he shown him his face, which was something he had never done before, or at least not in public, but he was also telling him that he was also quirkless, that he had also been bullied by his friend, and that society itself had not believed in him. But how did that happen? A spider gave you powers? Really? Asking his questions, Izuku searched with some hope in his voice for the possibility of finding a solution to his problem. Looking at the green-haired Spidey smiled. Unfortunately, the spider died after biting me. This spider was an experiment from a laboratory in New York where I had a trip. Looking at the back of his right hand, just where the spider had bitten him. But after my long years of being in this world, I learned something very important. Raising his gaze in search of the same gaze of the green-haired Spidey, he looked at Izuku, looking for that disappointment he found in his eyes after saying about the death of the spider. Did you learn something? With doubt in his voice, Izuku asked the spider hero about the learning he had mentioned. I learned that strength is not from the suit but from each one. Smiling at the green-haired boy, the brown-haired boy. Izuku looked surprised by the words. Although he liked them, in the end it was quite incredible he disagreed with them. I cannot agree. After all, apparently without power you cannot be a hero. Looking into Spidey's blue eyes. On this occasion, Spider-Man looked at him for a moment before even answering what he had said, but when he finally opened his mouth he first let out a sigh and stood up to look at the horizon again before speaking. Is it necessary to be powerful to be a hero? Is it necessary to be able to destroy a building to be a hero? Is it necessary to be someone who calls attention to be a hero? Of course not. It's not about appearance or what is shown, it's about what's inside our hearts. You don't need to be a hero. To be a hero, it's not about having a suit or a power, it's about doing well when it's necessary, it's about doing the right thing when it's needed. That you get up when no one else does, it's about when you fall you get up no matter the pain. Having a look full of motivation. Don't you need to be a hero to be a hero? Asked Izuku, who doubtfully asked about what Spidey said. Putting his Spider-Man mask back on, he looked straight at Izuku's face. Boy, from now on you can call me Master. I'll teach you what a true hero is. Chapter 2. He didn't know what to think. At that moment he was in his room, lying on his bed, his gaze never leaving his ceiling. In the end, so many things had happened that day. So many emotions in one day made the whole day difficult to digest. First being once again harassed by Bakugo, then almost being killed. Meeting the one who would be his idol, All Might, and having him tell him to give up on his dreams, and finally meeting Spider-Man. Surrender or fight, both are so different, both gave different advice, two different perspectives. One listened to me, understood me and supported me, the other just told me no. Getting up from his bed, he approached his desk where he searched for a while through several notebooks until he found the one he needed. When he opened it and searched for a while, he found what he wanted, the information he had collected about Spider-Man's abilities, personality and characteristics. He ran his hand over the page where the drawing of Spider-Man's suit was, moving his gaze throughout his room, his fist clenched, and approaching his wall he was about to tear off one of the All Might posters that was in his room. A feeling full of hate, of resentment was reflected in his eyes. In front of him one of the many posters he had was about to be destroyed, but his mind thought it over. His mind took it to the next level and removed it slowly and calmly. Taking his phone, Izuku took several photos of the one he had just removed from the wall along with all the others and all the material like figures he had, among other things from All Might. He took a photo and posted them on a social network to be able to sell them. Keeping them so they wouldn't get hurt, Izuku sat on his bed as he watched how his room now looked so lonely. Now that I look back, I've done so little in my life despite being only 14 years old. Izuku felt that his life was empty. He hadn't achieved anything in those 14 years. He felt that in those 14 years he hadn't lived anything. Looking back, all he saw was the same thing over and over again. His life was so repetitive. POV Peter. Swinging through the city after helping an old lady cross the street, Peter was thoughtful about the reason the boy reaching the top of a building. Spider-Man sat down as he looked at the city below him. Aunt May, is this the right thing to do? Helping this boy so similar to me, since when am I a teacher? Spidey, as a teacher, should I wear glasses? Looking at him as some guys were entering a bank with balaclavas, Peter rolled his eyes at the baby villains in front of him. Jumping off the building, Spidey quickly arrived at the front of the store, where he entered very calmly. Leaning against the wall, Spidey looked at the thieves who were grabbing wads of bills from one of the ATMs they had broken while they were laughing. Have they never told you that stealing is bad? With the thieves' gazes now on him, Spidey raised his hand. Me. He's a hero, exclaimed one of the thieves, shouted to his companions. Looking at them with a nod, Spidey didn't know how to act at that moment when he heard the thief, "Nah, I'm not a hero. I'm just a person in tights," in the middle of the night, raising his hands in a sign of surrender. While saying that, "What are you doing standing there doing nothing? Shoot him," shouting to his companions. Now the thief who was taking the money from the ATM gave them an order. Quickly taking out 2 pistols from their respective pants, the 2 robbers who were not collecting money and who were standing at that moment pointed at Spider-Man, and without thinking much, shot. Dodging the bullets that approached him, Spidey let the bullets pass close, and with his web shooter activating, he took the guns of the robbers, which now disarmed did not know what to do and were soon covered in cobwebs. The last attempt to take out the gun he had in his pants, but it was impossible when a spider web prevented him from moving his hand from his stomach. With another spider web arriving caused his other hand to now be held in the ATM, he was harmless, unable to do anything, while the cobwebs arrived causing him to now find himself nailed to the ground with his pants down, and with a spider web in his mouth. "I'll leave you here, friends. It was a nice talk, but you see it's late, and I left the beans out, but remember that you can always call your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man," making a sign to his wrist as if he had a watch on this. Spider-Man left the bank, and before leaving the place he called the police to take care of the rest while he left. A new dawn appeared in Japan, and with it a new happy day to live for most people. For Izuku, that case was different. Waking up in his bed at 6 in the morning, he got up only to have to go to his desk, where he stopped the alarm he had set the night before. Once up, Izuku left his room and went to the bathroom, where he washed his face and began to do his normal personal hygiene. When he returned to his room, he took his phone and checked it. Seeing that he had several offers of what Izuku had published, he began to check them one by one until it was 7 in the morning. So leaving his phone, he went to the kitchen, where he cooked something quite simple, and taking his things, which were only a backpack, his wallet, his keys, and a bottle of water, Izuku left a note on the kitchen table to let his mother know that he planned to go out. Leaving his house at 8 in the morning, breathing the fresh air that remained from the morning, he headed to the nearby beach. Although in the end it didn't change anything that it was close. In the end, the only thing you found there was trash, and more trash that no one went too close to. Once there, Izuku kept waiting until he felt someone touch his shoulder, which made him jump in surprise. "Wow, boy, you're pretty easy to surprise." Peter Parker had arrived at the beach just behind Izuku, where just finding him he had made sure to do everything possible, which wasn't that difficult, to get close to him without him noticing, to scare him. "I thought you'd have more problems arriving at 8 in the morning, but you look pretty good," Peter spoke while sitting on what was the hood of a car that was lying there on the beach. "I'm still pretty surprised that you want to train me. Why?" A confused Izuku asked Spidey, who looked at him with a smile. "Why do you ask that? What do you think, kid?" Leaning down a little as he remained seated, Peter looked into the eyes of the green-haired boy in front of him. "I don't know. I don't understand why you want to train me." Lowering his head without looking at Spidey, Izuku remained silent, waiting for Spidey's answer. "Do you remember what I said before? The strength does not come from the suit but from one. Do you understand? Without a direction, great power only leads you to self-destruction, and you already have that path, to be a hero, right?" Getting up from his place, Peter walked around. Izuku raised one of his arms and squeezed it a little. "First, what we will do is make you stronger. Do you want to help? Be a hero? Then we will start with the most basic." Standing in front of him, while placing a hand on his chin while thinking. "The most basic thing? I still have doubts." Izuku looked at Spidey with a nervous expression, but stopped talking when Spidey raised one of his hands and pointed at the beach. "Your mission is simple. From now on you will wake up before 8. You will get here at that time, and here you will do your training, clearing this beach full of trash. Then decide here you will do what you have to do. You will help in what you can when necessary. if you see an old lady help her, those are the beginnings of a hero. That is what a hero does, help everyone, not looking for gratitude or some kind of benefit, is doing it for the sake of it. It is doing it because you can do it. You are not a hero just for stopping villains, you are also a hero when you help someone in need. If you see that a cat is trapped in a tree, you help it. If you see a child release his balloon, you do everything possible and help him. You give everything of yourself to help everyone because you can do it. When you get home, you will start studying, you will learn, and you will improve mentally. It is not only about training the muscle but also the mind. You will sleep well, and the next day you will return to this beach. You will train, and you will fall, and you will get up, and you will train. If your bones break, you will fix them later. If you feel bad, that is not important. You will continue, and you will continue like this until the end, and when the end comes, it will not matter because it was only the beginning of the end. Understood, kid? With an excited voice and raising his fist in the air, Peter looked at Izuku with joy. You understood? Spider-Man raising his hand as if he were a soldier. Izuku looked at Spidey. So what are you doing standing here? Start training. Shouting for the last time, Spider-Man watched as Izuku approached a piece of metal which, although he struggled to lift it, in the end they did, and with difficulty he carried it. Boy, seeing him turn to look at him face to face, Peter smiled. Call me Peter. He watched as his eyes lit up and continued with his training after he had given him several nods. Looking up at him from his seat, Peter watched as he ran back and forth, carrying things back and forth, tires being dragged, boxes being loaded, pieces of wood being lifted, metal being pushed, push and pull, lift and drag. Minutes passed and Peter saw how Izuku's body showed the fatigue that he expected to happen. Sweat covered him and heavy breathing due to the effort was noticeable, but still he did nothing. He just stayed watching. That Izuku did not give up. This was not to make him stronger. Well, yes it was, but mainly it was for him to learn to give it his all until he could not take it anymore, and that was the goal, to make him work until his body could not take it anymore, not until he does not want to. No, this was until he cannot. They are totally different things. An hour passed and Peter watched as Izuku fell to the ground as he was breathing too tired. It was already 9 in the morning, so Peter got up from the hood of the car, approached Izuku and offered him a bottle of water, which Izuku took, uncorked it, and began to drink. It's time to rest, kid. Normally I would have you just rest and continue, but it's time to be heroes. We are going to patrol the city, and you will become a hero. Approaching a backpack on the ground, Peter took out his suit, which he put on, and then took out a mask identical to his, which he threw to Izuku. What is this for? Taking the mask in his hands, Izuku asked Peter, who was looking at him with a smile from behind his mask. Isn't it obvious? You'll wear it to help me. You'll be a hero. Giving him a thumbs up. Izuku smiled at him, knowing that he could be a hero. He quickly put on the mask and began to adapt to the new feeling. Ready? Giving him a final question, Spidey looked at Izuku with doubt, since he didn't see him as tired as before. Yes, with a lot of joy and excitement in his voice, Izuku answered Peter, who grabbed Izuku by the stomach and used his launchers to move away from the beach while he heard Izuku scream and felt how he was moving more because of the new experience. Stop moving, boy, or you'll fall. Arriving at a building, he dropped Izuku to the ground, where he would almost vomit if it weren't for the fact that he held himself in. Peter looked at him with blank eyes, but leaving him aside, Spider-Man approached the edge of the building and began to look towards the street. That was horrible, and Izuku, standing next to Peter, said while still having a strange expression. You should get used to it. In the future you will experience it more. Continuing looking at the street, looking for some case where it is necessary to intervene. Peter looked not far away at what he needed. Kid, look at that. Hitting Izuku's shoulder with the palm of his hand, Peter pointed to a place. Turning towards where Peter was pointing, Izuku could see in the distance how an old lady was carrying several bags to put them in a taxi. Is a lady having trouble with her bags? Izuku asked, in case that was what she was referring to. Exactly, an old lady is having problems and no one helps her. Why? Giving her a nod, Peter looked at Izuku when he asked him why. I have no idea, answered Izuku, who was being sincere. It's simple, he's not a villain, it's not something that draws much attention. The heroes don't help because it won't help them with their popularity, but we're not those heroes. We're going to go down, and you'll help her while I supervise you, understood? Making several movements of his hands, Peter explained the whole plan to Izuku, who understood. Izuku didn't understand that. That's how things really were understood. Are heroes like that? Are they all like that? No, if they were all like that, Peter would be too. He's a true hero, the others only take credit for fights, they're not heroes, those self-proclaimed heroes. Disgust me. Approaching Peter, he grabbed him by the stomach again and threw himself to the ground, and although Izuku didn't want to scream, he couldn't help but do so. When they reached the ground, they drew a lot of attention. Especially Peter was the one calling her, but they both left him aside and approached the old woman, whom they greeted. Okay, kid, it's your turn. Standing still while watching Izuku, Peter watched as he began to help the old lady put the bags in the trunk of the taxi. When Izuku finished helping, the old woman pinched his cheek and shook it a little, thanking him and asking them both their name, to which Peter answered, "We are your friendly neighbors, Spider-Man." And he, turning to see Izuku, he thought for a while until his mind lit up, Spider-Boy. Finishing his words, Peter took Izuku from his stomach again and left with him, swinging through the city. Chapter 3. After finishing helping the old lady and Peter proclaiming him Spider-Boy, he took him to the beach. They picked up his things and Peter took him home, where they said goodbye. Izuku knew he would continue patrolling, but he had a more important thing to do, according to Peter. Opening the door to his house, he soon arrived at the living room, where he met his mother, whom he greeted. That look hit him again, but he didn't care anymore. Peter believed in him, and now, even if he hadn't helped many, he was already a hero. He had helped an old woman and would continue like that. His mother's thoughts were irrevocable. He would be a hero without a quirk. Heading to his room after talking to her for a while, Izuku left his backpack next to his bed and took out several books that Peter had given him. The things that were most important apart from training and helping were studying, and he had given him material and enough for him to study, not only what should be in universities but also his own books, so that he could learn what he learned. Izuku remembered Peter's words at that moment: "You will destroy your body, but that does not mean that your mind will remain inactive, so you will study hard, understood?" Taking out all the books and notebooks that Peter gave him, Izuku looked at everything lazily but couldn't let his laziness win, so he opened the notebook that Peter recommended him to study first. He observed how everything that was inside was what he had seen in high school, but everything was explained in an easier way, in a way that he not only easily understood but comprehended it. He knew he was smart, he was one of the best in his class, even in the entire school, but Peter had given him a notebook that contained what he knew with better explanations. The formulas used in mathematics were better and more understandable. Izuku understood. Peter was a genius. He looked sideways at the other books and notebooks that Peter had given him and got excited about what he would achieve. From now on, his life would improve, and he would be a great hero like Peter, like Spider-Man. Yawning, Izuku's sleepy eyes opened. It was 6 in the morning, and he turned off his alarm clock. Yawning once more, he stretched, feeling his muscles ache. Leaving his room, he went into the bathroom where, like the day before, he washed his face and did the basic cleaning. Going down to the kitchen with his Izuku backpack, he prepared an egg with bacon and toast with jam on top for his breakfast. When he finished eating his food, he checked his cell phone and saw that he now had more offers for his All Might items. Among all of these, there was one that was higher than the others. When he saw the person's profile, he found that he was a collector, and that he was offering a fairly large amount for each of the products he was offering. Sending him a message, Izuku checked one last time what he had in his backpack before leaving the apartment. As he walked, he concentrated on thinking about what he would do that day with Peter. Seeing a soda bottle lying on the ground, Peter picked it up and looked for a place to throw it. When he found one, he threw it away and walked away with a smile. It's fun to know that you're helping society. Arriving at the beginning of the beach, Izuku quickened her pace until she reached the stairs so she could go down and reach the same area she had been in yesterday with Peter. When he got to the beach, he looked at how little he had cleaned and how much was left. When I met Peter, it was Friday. My first day of training was Saturday, and now it's Sunday. Tomorrow I will continue with my classes. Although it is the final semester, I can't leave classes. When I finally finish the semester, I will have 2 months of vacation before entering high school. Now the problem is high school. But I will think about that later. In question, along with the months I have left in high school and the 2 months of my vacation, I have 8 months to make a change. Stretching a little, Izuku got ready to start before Peter even told him his time was little and his work was a lot, but that would not discourage him. He would get it no matter what it costs. Moving from side to side, Izuku towards his training, cleaning the beach that was full of trash before realizing Peter was sitting on the hood that he had used yesterday as a seat. When he noticed him, Peter raised one of his hands as a greeting and pointed to the trash to continue what was understood by Izuku, who continued with his work. While he was working on the beach, Peter was thoughtful, and although he did not know the reason, Izuku remained without asking questions and concentrated on cleaning. POV Peter. Just arriving and he was already cleaning. Peter was happy that the boy felt motivated. It would help him continue with everything, but that was not all he needed. Discipline. Discipline was something he was looking for, and for that he wanted him to get here before 8 every day, but there was a problem that Peter knew would be a problem in his plans, and those problems were called studies. Were obviously important, but would take away time with his student. I will have to move the pieces before he wanted, thinking a little more about the training of the green-haired boy he had in front of him. When he saw that the time was approaching after the start of his work, Peter decided to get up from his seat and went to his backpack to take out a bottle of water, which he threw at Izuku, who was hit in the back of the neck by the bottle. "Hey, what's wrong with you?" Asking with a little indignation, the green-haired boy looked at Peter in a bad way, who only let out a giggle. "I thought you could dodge it. Leaving that aside, boy, tomorrow you will start your classes, but don't think that you will be saved because of your training, understood?" Smiling, Peter looked at Izuku, waiting for an answer with his normal motivation. "Yeah, I lose," rubbing himself a little where he hit the water bottle. Izuku began to drink water from the bottle while he sat down to rest a little from all the effort he had made. "Our plans will change a little. Your mission now will be to get up earlier at 6. At 6 you must already be awake." Looking seriously at Izuku, Peter was waiting for him to understand why he told him that. He knew that he entered high school around 8 or 9 in the morning to his classes. In the end, it was a known schedule that high school children had. You will get up before 6 and exercise, you will stop coming to the beach, but we will keep in touch, then you will go to your classes, you will pass them, and when you leave them you will go either to some address that I tell you or simply to do what you want. The night will be left for you to study, while your afternoons will be your moments of rest, understood? Speaking seriously, Spider-Man was doing his best to make his training method understood to Izuku. He wanted to make him understand that while in his mornings he would train, in the afternoons they would do hero things, or simply he would do whatever he wanted if he was busy, or if Izuku himself he didn't have the chance to go to any heroism training, leaving the nights for him to study and learn more things. Understood? "But how will I do my training, and what will happen with the beach?" a curious Izuku asked Peter, who thought a bit as he continued creating his plans while he spoke. "We'll leave the beach for the weekends. Saturdays and Sundays we'll take care of breaking your body here, and as for how you'll train, well, there are many exercises you can do, and to help you a little we too are going to go by several things." Approaching Izuku until patting his shoulders and then starting to move in the direction of the stairs. Still a little tired, Izuku began to follow Peter, who continued walking further and further away from the beach. A short time passed until both of them arrived at a part close to the city center, as it was known to be the center due to the increase in the number of stores in the area, following Peter without much problem after spending some time walking. It didn't take long for them to reach their destination. Peter stopped in front of a shopping center and pushed Izuku so that they both could enter it. Peter took Izuku to a store that he knew that had many products, but among them what interested Peter the most were some adjustable dumbbells that could be changed in weight as needed, ranging from 5 kilograms to 25 kilograms. Although they weren't super expensive things, they weren't cheap either, so Izuku tried to refuse so that Peter wouldn't buy them, but he didn't listen to him and bought them anyway, and without any effort he carried them to take them to the counter. But in the middle of the way they both came across another accessory that Peter grabbed and also began to carry it to buy it, while Izuku continued trying to avoid it, now even more so when he saw that it would now be more expensive for Peter. What Peter had grabbed was a set of wrist and leg weights along with a weighted chest plate for Izuku. Each of the wristbands weighed 5 kilograms, as did the leg parts, leaving as an exception the milkmaid, who had metal plates that could be removed and put on, asking to adjust to his weight. The largest he had was 20 kilograms. Approaching the counter, Peter left his things on it while looking at the man who was serving, who was quite muscular. Without giving it any importance, Peter saw how the man was scanning the codes of the things to charge them, but before he finished he looked at what was in the display case that was behind the owner of the establishment, and also asked him to charge him for those. Since they were grips, the gentleman also charged them, and when he finished Peter paid him with his money, and together with Izuku they left the place, with Peter carrying everything except the grips, which was what Izuku could carry. Now heading to a restaurant, they both entered and ordered what they would eat while Peter left his purchases next to the table. It wasn't necessary, Izuku spoke in a low voice while looking at what Peter had bought. You may be right. It wasn't necessary, but it will help your growth. Looking at Izuku with a blank look, Peter threw him a balled-up piece of paper that he took out of the straw that had been given to him along with his drink. From now on you will start exercising with this. First you will start without the weight on your body, only using your own body as weight, and well you will use the dumbbells and the grips. In the future when you can with that, and you need more, you will put on the anklets and wristbands, leaving the chest guard at the end, finishing by taking the straw from his drink to be able to drink from it. Peter looked as Izuku just nodded at him, while continuing to keep his gaze down. Calm down, boy. I have more money than I need or want. In the end they also pay me for being a hero. Think about it this way, you will pay me in the future by becoming a great hero, so leave that face and take it as a gift from me to the future successor of Spider-Man. Smiling, Peter looked as Izuku nodded and also began to drink what he ordered, leaving them in silence as they waited for their food to arrive. Do they pay you too? Izuku's question came unexpectedly to Peter, who looked at him. Unfortunately I am human and I need to eat, although that does not mean, child, that you are going to be a hero for money. Sometimes you can understand that people have needs, but if a hero only does it for money, can he be considered a hero? Peter had mentioned that to him so that he would understand that not everything in life was money. You said you have more money than you need, but still looking at Peter, still keeping the same topic of money. Peter stared at him a little. I get paid to be a hero, I use part of it to eat and well live. As for the rest, sometimes I donate it. I don't need it. I have a pretty normal apartment for just one person. I live alone. I don't have any pets and I have few luxuries. The biggest one I have is a television and a good cell phone, but that would be all. That's why I say I have more money than I need, boy. I once met someone who felt bad for getting money to help others, but think without that money that person wouldn't live, and if he hadn't lived, how could he have helped others? Don't look at earning money by helping others as something bad. Look at it as something bad when you only help others to earn money. They are two very different things. As long as you keep helping because you want to help and not to earn money, you will continue to be a true hero. Watching as his food arrived, Peter took the chopsticks they gave him and prepared them to start eating his katsudon. Remember, kid, if you win something for helping, it's not bad. The bad thing is helping to win something. Chapter 4. Leaving his things in his room, Peter left through the window of Izuku's room after having left what he bought him. Deciding to patrol the city for a while, Peter headed off swinging. Izuku was left alone in his room, beginning to unpack everything that Peter bought him. He began to place everything in his room, letting himself fall on his bed. Izuku looked at his phone where there was a message answering the one he had sent earlier to the collector, who apparently was quite interested, and they both agreed to meet on Monday of the following week at a halfway point where Izuku would bring several objects that he offered to show. After finishing to agree things with the collector, he looked at the number that Peter had left him so he could contact him, and thus talk better about the days when Peter would take him to help people. Lying down on his bed, Izuku allowed tiredness to dominate his mind, and with that he ended up falling into the hands of Morpheus and falling asleep. POV Peter. It didn't take long for him to reach the buildings while he was swinging. If Spider-Man had returned to the city after a day of shopping and was swinging, taking out his phone in the middle of the air, he jumped, thus releasing his webs, and while Hiba was falling from the sky while sending messages, Peter was calm in the air, and when the time was right he threw one of his webs to swing low to the ground, although before continuing swinging his spider sense appeared. Looking around he saw how not far away in an alley a guy who had a balaclava had a girl by the collar of the shirt she was wearing while his other hand had fire. Falling on one of the nearest roofs, Spidey began to run towards the place while jumping between roofs until he reached the top of the guy. Giving a small jump, he dropped to the ground, staying right behind him, and without the guy noticing, Spidey's head appeared next to the guy, making himself visible to the girl, who was crying. When she saw him, her eyes filled with light as she cried more, so she moved a little so the assailant would notice him, which didn't take long. Didn't your mother tell you that you shouldn't make a woman cry? Dodging a blow by taking a step back, Spidey watched as the girl suddenly ran away when she was released, so he watched her for a while until he returned his attention to the Alcitanti, who threw a fireball at him, which he easily dodged just by taking a step to the right. Watching the fireball explode against the wall, which was now black, was something that Spidey was more interested in seeing than the Alcitanti, who was preparing another fireball. You should call 911. It seems like you're burning. Oh, wait, maybe you're cold, so it's normal that you want to warm up, but you know fire isn't the best. Jumping and holding on with one hand to a ladder that was next to the building, he dodged the fireball. Oh, thanks for the kindness, but you know I'm not cold. It's 24 for me that makes me hot. Or is it because I move a lot? Well, it doesn't matter, you know, I just got back from buying some things and I'm tired. I want to get home, have a drink, and play a little. Dodging another fireball. As Spidey let go, he crouched down under the attacker's blow, and from his position he poked him in the stomach with his index finger. And what's your name? Flamidas? Lamidas? Applejack? Why, that would look great on you. We'll draw an apple for you, and that's it. Dodging a hook, deflecting a jab, and taking a step back to dodge an attempted kick. No, not a kick. An attempted kick. Spidey grabbed the bridge of his nose, struggling to think. Wait, I'll think of something good. Nope, I can't think of anything. Dodging a flame of fire that came from the hands of the Spidey guy. He looked naturally at the fire that passed in front of him, and a good idea came to his mind, so he threw a web at the assailant's balaclava, which flew away when Spidey threw the web. Seeing the red-haired boy, Spidey bowed while placing one of his fists on his chest, dodging the fireball that the assailant released. I declare you. Drum roll. TRRR. The always hot. Ha 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 ha. You think it's pretty good, right? Not long after that, the always hot attacked Spidey, trying to make him a spider, crackling. Keep quiet, I am Hades, working as a flamethrower. The always hot filled the entire place with fire. He no longer saw who he was attacking. He was only burning everything that was around him without any sense at all. Little time passed until he felt something hit him in the chest. When he looked at it, he saw the white line that led to he couldn't see when his body was pulled. When he looked at the spider, he only saw how a fist approached his face and connected with his nose. A sharp pain was the only thing he felt. He wanted to cry. His tears wanted to come out of his eyes, and he felt like his mouth now had a rusty taste. When he opened his eyes again, he had Spidey's face in front of him. A chill ran down his spine when he didn't hear him say anything for a while. You're an idiot, and apart from always being hot, you want to always be dead or something. Burning yourself is like me hitting myself. Moving the assailant away from his face a little, Spidey pulled the assailant back with force while he also approached him, giving him a headbutt that left the always hot man unconscious, making him a ball of spider web and leaving him hanging from the stairs that he had used before to dodge a fireball. And after that he left the place, after having already called the police. Running back across the roofs of buildings, Spidey was looking for something similar to the Everhot to defeat. I'll give you $100 for each poster you give me and $150 for each of these figures. What do you say, boy? Talking to Izuku, an older man was in a cafe with Izuku, who was drinking a cup of coffee while the man had one of the All Might figures in his hands. So Izuku left his cup of coffee on the table while he looked at the man for a moment, and then raised his hand to shake his hand. Well done, boy, you won't regret it. Taking out his wallet, the man gave Izuku $600 for the 3 posters he had at that moment, and for the 2 All Might figures. With the money in his hands, Izuku watched as the man walked away from the place, muttering things about real heroes and not like the threatening insects, or something like that was what Izuku could hear. It had been a week since he started training with Peter. That day he had left school and went straight to the cafeteria he was in to meet the collector. As far as he knew, the guy didn't give him his name but told him he could call him JJ or something like that. He didn't give it much importance, and they only agreed on a certain price. Izuku was fine with the price he sold it for, plus he still had a lot to sell, and $600 was already quite a lot. A lot in reality. In yen it was 88,000 or 89,000, something like that. In the end, the important thing was that it was a lot of money. He just finished his coffee, Izuku paid for it, and started walking to the exit. As he left, he answered, deeply thinking about what to do in those moments. After all, Peter hadn't told him anything about training. Spider-Man flies, Spider-Man does whatever a spider can, spins a web any size, catches thieves just like. Her thoughts were interrupted by her phone, which she quickly picked up and answered when she knew it was Peter from the ringtone she had set. Hey kid, aren't you hungry? Hearing Peter's voice on his phone, Izuku just smiled and thought for a while before answering, wouldn't that be the case? Why? Answering Peter's question, Izuku began to walk in the direction of his house while talking to Peter. I was eating on a roof and I said, why not invite my student, but since you are not hungry, then why not? We will see each other in the building where we met. Do not arrive too late, because evil does not rest, and there is work to do. When Peter finished the call, Izuku just looked at his phone for a while and looked in the direction of the building where they met, and started walking towards it. He didn't know why he wanted to see him there when they normally saw each other at the beach, but in the end it worked out quite well since he was pretty close to it, and having to go to the beach would have taken him a while to walk. Upon reaching the roof of the building, Izuku saw how Peter was sitting on the edge while he waited for him, so when he was there he approached him. Peter turned around to see him. Seeing him taking off his mask, he saw a smile on Peter's face, which got up and approached him. Expecting some kind of joke or something strange like that when Peter took his hands, and after he held them for a while he felt like Peter had left something in them while he moved away from him a little while continuing to smile at him. When he opened the palms of his hands, he observed how what he had in them was similar to a watch with an odd shape, or a bracelet. Congratulations, you passed the tutorial. Now comes the real game. Those you have in your hands are your triggers. Taking out of one of the pockets of his Spidey suit, he handed Izuku a sheet of paper that had a drawing of the trigger. Now the cool part is coming, so kid, get ready. I'll teach you how to swing right. Put on your mask and hold on so I don't forget. Raising his hand, showing Izuku a capsule with a white liquid in it, Peter gave it to him and taught him how to place it in the trigger. That's our essence. Those are our webs. Handing him another sheet where the entire formula and the procedure to create the web were. Peter moved quickly while pushing Izuku to the edge of the building. It's time. Come on, calm down. It's just a leap of faith. Making the same hand sign that Peter does when he uses his web shooters, Izuku watched as a web shot into the air, quickly moving away from him, watching it fall. As it moved away for a moment longer, Izuku stopped looking at the web and looked down at the ground where far below he could see the road where vehicles were passing. It's just a leap of faith. With bright eyes full of light, Izuku slowly took his mask out of his pants pockets, put it on, and then raised his right leg, leaving it in the air, doing a half turn, making Peter think that Izuku wouldn't jump, raising his arms slightly, letting himself fall. Izuku closed his eyes at that moment, while he let himself fall. When he opened his eyes again, he saw how the buildings passed quickly around him, how the air hit him as his speed increased with each passing second. Although it was almost imperceptible, it didn't take long when he saw Peter jump behind him, and at that moment was when he fired the net of his web shooter, which went up and up through the air. Chapter 5. Walking next to Peter, Izuku was somewhat upset. The reason? He was covered in dust and all beaten up, and the other reason was because Peter was laughing. He had been laughing for so long that tears were already appearing at the corner of his eyes, and although he wanted to keep laughing, Peter stopped to look at Izuku while putting a hand on his shoulder. Don't worry, I crashed more than once when I was starting. It's just a matter of practice, and when you fall you get up, so we'll keep practicing this from now on, okay? With a smile on his face, Peter tried to cheer up Izuku, who just nodded at his comment, so removing his hand from his shoulder, Peter continued walking while keeping his gaze in front of him. The good thing is that if you jumped, it would be more complicated if you hadn't done it. Letting out one more laugh, Peter looked at his own web shooters when he was done. What do you mean? When Peter mentioned the jump, Izuku was surprised. After all, he didn't understand why it would be complicated if he had decided not to jump. Turning to look at Izuku, Peter thought for a moment before answering. If you hadn't jumped first, we would have to make you stop being afraid. Then it would be more complicated. Looking at him as Izuku understood what he meant, Peter looked back in front, and seeing that he wasn't that far from Izuku's house, he stopped. Well, here we say goodbye. Yes, stopping a few steps ahead of Peter, Izuku turned to look at him so he could say goodbye. Thanks for everything. Peter bowing, Izuku truly thanked Peter with happiness for having believed in him and giving him the hope of fulfilling his dream of being a hero. No need to thank me. Making him stand up, Peter smiled at Izuku and raised one of his hands to point at the trigger with the other. Trained with ease. I trained with soda cans and stuff to aim. By the way, should you start making your suit, don't you think? After all, just a mask isn't enough anymore. It'll be funny how the villains react when they see two Spider-Mans laughing at the end. At the image that came to his mind, Peter began to leave while leaving Izuku alone, who watched him leave. My suit. Just thinking about that, an image came to Izuku's mind about the suit of his dreams. But dreams are dreams. Broken dreams. Stopping imagining that suit, he began to think about how to make a suit which would be the same as Peter's, but he knew that Peter had used several designs of his suit throughout his history, so he would review all the designs that he used and get some idea that way. Now thinking about what I wanted. Before I realized that I had bad taste. Already in his room, Izuku was lying on his bed while looking at the launchers that were on his wrists, playing with them a little. Peter was shooting from time to time towards the ceiling, trying to hit the exact point he wanted, and although sometimes he was lucky and he hit it, it was just luck, and that was something that had to change. He couldn't leave it to luck. When he was in his suit, it was his responsibility to handle his launchers well so as not to fail in helping people. Getting out of bed and taking one of the grips that Peter bought him, he placed it on his desk while he stood on the other side of the room and began to aim until he activated the launcher, trying to hit the grip, which he failed to do, so he just painted and shot again and did it again. When he couldn't do it once more, it turned again. When it was new it didn't work, it became another attempt, and that attempt became the fourth of the previous attempt. Walking in the direction of his school, Izuku had his launchers in his backpack as well as his backpack. Although it was strange for him to carry it every day, he always carried his mask with him since Peter had told him that evil does not rest and therefore they could not stop being alert to help if possible. Arriving at his school, he quickly arrived at his classroom where just entering he found himself receiving glances from people. Of course it was because he was quirkless, but that no longer mattered to him. No words mattered. Not far from his seat he found his former best friend who was bragging about his quirk while shouting as if he could not be heard. Sitting down, Izuku decided to stop thinking about the others and continued thinking about the suit he had to make. He wanted it to be as similar as possible to Peter's, but without them being the same so they could be distinguished. He was brought back to reality when he heard the teacher greeting him upon entering the classroom, so taking out one of his notebooks, Izuku slowly began to make a small sketch of what he wanted while the teacher talked about something in class that he didn't care much about. The classes ended up being quite calm that day. He didn't have any kind of problems in class. Everything they had seen came in the notebooks that Peter had given him. He was already advancing to the level of education he was at. Quickly leaving through the classroom door, Izuku ran out of the school grounds, passing over the bridge where he found All Might. Izuku jumped from the east to fall into the area below where he only had to touch the ground. He took off his backpack and opened it so he could put on his mask and his launchers. Putting his backpack on again, Izuku ran again until he reached a place where he fired his launchers and thus reached a roof where he stayed for a while looking at the ground until he decided to jump and fire his launcher again to start swinging. He began to walk the whole way in this way, although each time he ended up on the ground because he could not propel himself in the air while swinging, so he ended up after several spider webs on the ground where he had to move quickly to reach another building and launch himself again. When he reached his destination, he went down a lonely alley where he took off his mask, although he left the launchers so that he could leave the alley and enter the store he needed. POV Peter. Everything is quiet that afternoon, and Spidey was reading a book while eating a burrito. When his cell phone began to ring with a well-known melody, Peter took it and began to read the message that had arrived from Izuku, who was preparing his materials to be able to create his own suit, so he smiled. Although that smile disappeared when he saw that a notification arrived about a problem with a villain who was causing chaos that was quite larger than what a person normally is, even for that world full of quirks. When Peter arrived at the scene, he found that there was another hero who was already trying to stop him. He didn't remember his name, but it had something to do with wood. The villain had an elongated face that reminded him of a shark or a rhinoceros, although he didn't know exactly what it was. As he launched himself forward, he fell into one of the branches that the branch guy had left there when he tried to catch the villain. "Hey big boy, did your mommy give you a lot of chocolate when you were little?" Looking up and down, Spidey said that while his voice sounded surprised. Before anyone could say anything else, Spidey felt his spider sense activate along with the trembling of the ground, so he jumped while throwing a web at the tree boy so he wouldn't get hurt. He just fell on a branch further away from the villain, and it was when he saw how the legs of a giant girl appeared and gave a flying wrestling kick to the villain, who flew out falling next to him. The girl made the entire subway line start to shake once again. He felt his spider sense come into action, and when he realized he was looking at how several rubble were falling towards the civilians who were below, opening his eyes wide, Spidey shot a spider web towards the rubble that fell towards the civilians. Careful looking as if he couldn't save them all, he was even doubting that he could save those who were under the falling rubble since he couldn't reach it with his web. He shouted loudly. With her scream, she made the tree boy realize, and he also tried to act, but like him, they would not arrive in time to save them. Peter was watching as slowly as he couldn't stop the death of those civilians, so he gritted his teeth, but it was just at that moment that 2 spider webs appeared, pulling the civilians who were further away from Peter while the latter were pushed. Feeling relieved, Peter just smiled beneath his mask as he saw how his young apprentice had miraculously arrived, even though he hadn't expected it at all. POV Izuku. He was leaving the store when he saw what was happening near him, deciding to leave his things in an alley. Izuku approached with his mask in his pocket to observe the situation when he saw what had happened with the flying girl who he recognized as a new heroine called Empty Lady. Seeing the rubble, Izuku quickly put on his mask and did his best to intervene by throwing webs with his launchers at the civilians further away while he tackled the closest ones to get them out of the way of the rubble. When he saw that everyone was safe, still with surprise on their faces, Izuku helped the civilians get up and move out of danger. With all the civilians out of danger and a larger group of civilians who were gossiping in the place watching the heroes, he ran to a place closer to the subway line where he began to throw spider webs at the areas that had more breaks to avoid the possible fall of debris. Before everyone's eyes, for the first time they saw a boy who had a Spider-Man mask just like the arachnid hero who had an ability also similar to his. When Izuku finished with her webs, she tried hard to climb up the subway tracks using her webs, where both her master and the hero Kamui Woods were. As soon as he arrived, he saw how the villain and the heroine were getting up from the blow, so he got closer to his master. "Well, what's the master plan?" With doubt and nervousness in his voice, Izuku asked Peter about what they would do. After all, it was the first time he found himself in this situation. He had never faced anyone else, and in the short time he has been learning from Peter, he has not faced any villain. "Okay, kid, this is simple. Shoot webs to stop him. Legs so he doesn't move, arms to avoid being hit, eyes so he can't see, and a mouth so he can't talk. That's what your mission will be. I'll be in charge of keeping him at bay." Saying quickly, Peter threw a web to the sides of the subway line and stretched it to gain momentum and be able to shoot out in the direction of the villain. "Wait, Spider-Man, you know this guy. He can't get in. It's illegal to use your quirk without a hero license. He can't do this with an authoritative voice, and it would be the hero tree," he spoke in search of explanations. You're talking to me, trying at the same time, and they turned to look at him at the same time. Both Peter and Izuku showed an emotion of boredom in their voice when answering the twig man. Shooting out, Peter approached the villain, who looked at him with an angry look, but before he could do anything, seeing Spidey flying towards him, he felt a lot of pain in his eye when, without realizing it, and Izuku threw a web at him that hit him right in the eye, and it was burning, so he put his hands on his face, rubbing his eyes, trying to get rid of the burning sensation and the pain with his hands on his face. Peter took the opportunity to throw his own web, thus managing to stick one of the villain's arms to his face, which was taken advantage of by Empty Lady. Threw a punch at the villain, who was thrown far away, but before he hit the ground he was stopped by many branches that came from Kamui, who had shouted the name of his ability, although that did not prevent one of the villain's arms, not being completely stopped, from beginning to destroy Wood's wood. So both Peter and Izuku began to throw their webs to prevent him from moving any further, which they achieved quite easily. After throwing their webs, both Izuku and Peter watched as the villain with a strange face was on the ground, immobilized by branches and webs. Soon the screams of the civilians who were celebrating the victory of the heroes began to what Peter and Izuku turned to see each other, and both raised their fists, which they collided for the good work, which led Peter to pat Izuku on the back for the good work she did the first time he found himself in a situation like that, although he appreciates that he didn't do much. If it weren't for him, several civilians would have been injured or even and most likely killed in that place. The greatest hero was Izuku, and Peter was proud that his apprentice, instead of addressing the villain or helping them, focused on helping the civilians first. Both Kamui and Empty Lady approached the 2 masked men, although it was ironic to say so when they themselves were wearing masks. When they reached them, the most serious was Kamui, who looked a lot at Izuku, who only looked at how Empty Lady seemed to be quite nervous being in front of her master, so although it was not noticeable, she only rolled her eyes when she realized that this is how she should have looked in the past. "Do you even know what you've done?" With a serious and reprimanding voice, Kamui looked seriously at the 2. Looking at each other, both Izuku and Peter raised their hands and pointed their fingers at themselves. "Are you talking to me? Are you talking to me?" Speaking at the same time with a tone of doubt, They both looked at Kamui, who only had a twitch in his eye, although that was not noticeable because of his mask. Chapter 6. Even with Kamui's gaze on them, both Peter and Izuku began to talk, although the conversation came more from Peter, who gave Izuku recommendations on how to act in those situations, although he had mentioned to him on more than one occasion that he did a good job in his decision to help the civilians before going to help them. Although Empty Lady wanted to get closer to Spider-Man to be able to talk to him since he was a fairly famous and well-known hero who was almost an idol to her, but she didn't feel sure what to do for several reasons. Among them was the look that Kamui Woods was giving her idol and the boy who had a mask just like her idol's, and the other reason was that same boy didn't know what to think at that moment. She was completely blank. She had just discovered that apparently her idol had an apprentice who was being instructed by what she was thinking about the new Spider-Man. An heir? Tilting her head slightly in doubt at her thoughts, Empty Lady still didn't know what to do about the situation before her, although her thoughts were interrupted by the loud voice of someone beside her. "Where do you two think you're going?" With an annoyed voice, Kamui Woods shouted at the pair of arachnids who were leaving the place while talking about what they could eat. Kamui Woods' patience was being tested by the pair in front of him. He had had to deal with one of them a lot. Spider-Man had always been a pain for most heroes. He was someone you could respect but was also very annoying. And now he had to deal with two. For Kamui, it was the worst. Slowly both Spider-Mans turned around, and that only made Kamui have another twitch in his eye when he saw before his eyes two people so similar. "For something to eat? Do you want to come?" Izuku innocently asked the stick hero. No, kid, think about it. He's the stick hero, he does photosynthesis, a little water and sun, and that's it. The stick hero is standing for battle with a knowing voice, Peter told Izuku as if he had all the information about the hero in front of them, so Izuku just nodded at the new information his teacher gave him. Empty Lady could only let out a laugh which she tried to hold back with her hand as she took what Spider-Man said in a different way. Although it could have been on purpose, she didn't know it, but it still made her laugh, and that was the important thing. Kamui wasn't laughing so much and looked with annoyance at Spider-Man, who was retreating with his apprentice, so he tried to stop them once again, only receiving an epic ignore from both Spideys. "Wait, aren't you going to stay to talk to the reporters downstairs?" Speaking almost in a shout so that both could hear, Empty Lady asked about the subject of the reporters to both Spider-Mans, who turned around at the same time, once again causing a drop of sweat to appear on Empty Lady seeing the synchronicity they had. "I don't care, that's not my thing, you can keep them for yourselves," Spidey said with a bored voice on the subject, but he just stayed quiet when he saw his apprentice take a step towards the heroine. Although he didn't notice it, and although no one else did, some reporters managed to start recording what was happening between the four heroes. "Wait for the reporters? For what? Fame? Don't compare me to the others, don't compare me to those who only take credit for fights, don't compare me to those false heroes." Turning around after his outburst, Izuku and Peter walked away from the area, although while they were walking, Peter put one of his hands on Izuku's shoulders. The reason was simple, he wanted to give him support. Leaving behind two shocked pro-heroes, and although neither of them mentioned it, they were no longer as excited to talk to reporters. "So you feel better now?" he asked his little student Peter, who continued walking along the subway tracks. Yes, without looking at his teacher, Izuku just continued walking until they reached what was a pretty good area in which they both shot their webs at one of the buildings, thus getting off the subway tracks, and although it was true that Peter did not need to do that, it was to follow his student. Already on the ground, they only walked a little more and arrived at an alley from which Peter took out clothes with which he covered his suit, while Izuku alone took off his mask and put it in a backpack that he took out of the same place where Peter had taken his clothes. "Well, kid, that's all for today. Go rest and train even more. Your aim is already good, but improving is never bad, right?" With a smile, Peter left the task to Izuku, who gave him a small smile and said goodbye to him as he left the alley. Stopping walking, Izuku turned around to see where Peter had gone, but when he didn't see him, Izuku turned around and started running towards his house. You just get to this one, and after having greeted his mother, Izuku went into his room where he took out his notebook in which he had written everything about Spider-Man, from his web shooters to his suit, his powers and all his characteristics, and he began to work on the design of the suit, and although the red and blue were classic, it needed to be quite different in some way, So he changed the blue to black and decided to change the suit a bit too so that it wouldn't just be a copy of Peter's. I still didn't have it secured, but it was already a big step forward, and I still had to wait to be able to have it. It had been weeks since that day now. Both Izuku and Peter were swinging through the city. Izuku had made a lot of progress in his abilities and was now better than before. In some cases he even occasionally went out alone to help people, although normally he stayed out of certain situations in which it was better to have a hero who could do the job. A villain, although he could defeat some, it was better for the heroes to take care of him. He was not yet prepared, and Peter believed the same. He had very little with his training, and going against villains would be something very dangerous, something that would be better not to do until his abilities became more. Besides that, he did not have certain abilities that Peter had: super strength, agility, spider sense. The ability to stick to walls was not something he had at his disposal that could help him much. If he had those abilities, he would not mind going against villains, but since that was not the case, he stayed out of it. They both stopped swinging and stood looking down at an alley where a robbery of a citizen with bad ways towards a girl was being processed. The thief was red. Why? I didn't know, but it was red. Okay, kid, let's do this. You go down and catch him, and if he manages to escape, I'll take care of him, okay? Peter spoke to Izuku, who smiled at him under his mask, and after giving him a thumbs up, he threw a web and went down the building. When the thief was about to take the bag from the girl he was stealing, a spider web hit him in the face, thus not letting him see him falling between the girl and the thief. He removed the thief's hand from the girl's bag, hit him in the face, and when he was gone, he fell backwards to the ground. Izuku clicked his tongue several times in disappointment. When the thief removed the spider web, he found a boy who was wearing normal clothes, only keeping his mask. In the end, he still hadn't made his own costume. He liked being alone with the mask, and he was never satisfied with his costume. He felt that something was missing, but he didn't know what. Hey Red, it looks like you've got a web on your face. Got it? Haha, right? Haha. The alley was silent for a moment until Spider-Man appeared behind the thief and punched him, knocking him unconscious. Well, we have to improve your jokes. Hearing that from Peter, Izuku sighed and his whole body fell in disappointment. Well, help me and we'll leave him for the police to take away. Understood. He began to wrap him in spider web while Peter watched him, and in the end he carried the thief and left him hanging from a ladder that was in the alley. Hey. Upon hearing them both, Spideys turned around and then turned to look at themselves. Peter gave him a salute and left the place, leaving Izuku to take credit for his work. Izuku stared at the girl when he saw that Peter left. She was pretty, she had blonde hair and blue eyes, she had glasses, and in short, she was beautiful. Thanks for saving me. Are you the spider boy? The golden-haired girl in front of her asked with doubt. She blushed a little. After all, she knew him, but she didn't let it affect her. Spider boy, yeah, my master gave it to me. He's not the best anyway. I'm glad you're okay, miss. Take care. Saying to leave since he didn't know what to do, he tried to leave, but before leaving he heard the girl tell him her name. Melissa Shield is the name he heard before he left the alley. When he got to the roof, he found his master without the mask, and moving his eyebrows made him frown. Shut up. Soon Peter began to laugh while doing a pretty bad imitation of how he had acted in front of the girl. After a while of Peter's teasing, they both went swinging, hoping not to have to face any villains, although it was true that Peter was a professional and a great hero. If there were no villains, it was better. After all, who wanted to endanger people? Several had passed, and now Izuku was alone on the roof of a building eating a hamburger while still wearing the mask. His teacher, well, Peter had not been able to go because he had a job to do. His meal was interrupted when he heard the police sirens sounding, so he approached the edge of the building to see what was happening. When he saw the patrol cars and even ambulances going in a certain direction, he shrugged and launched himself to follow them. When he arrived at a nearby building, he found a villain who had a hostage in his hands, while behind him there was a store which had broken windows for some reason, although he did not know why. I honestly didn't understand the civilians very much. They were in a dangerous place, and instead of leaving and hiding, they were lying in a group to see what was happening. I didn't know what to do at that moment. I could jump in and help, of course, but I could also endanger people if I did that. He only thought for a second more and launched himself again. He had to be fast if he wanted to help. On the one hand, he didn't know what to do, and on the other, he had an idea. The problem was that he had to see if it would work, and the heroes never showed up even though time had passed. How unfortunate.
Let me know in the comments below if you guys want the next part. Also check out my other video that has been shown in left. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this video please like and share this video. And have a fantastic day. Bye.